You know, we don't want to give him credit for what he does, but he does a lot of stuff, and he is working full time doing a lot of things. And he is good at what he does. He is so good that he can pull us down and connive us and us not even ever know it. And think that we're heading in the right direction until oftentimes it's too late. But I'm going to tell you, with God, it's never too late to turn back. And, you know, I think about this subject from time to time. Have you ever thought about what would you do if you were God? You know, I mean, of course, none of us can handle that responsibility because, you know, we would think, well, if somebody's sinned, look, let's get rid of them. Let's do away with them, because when we go back to the Old Testament and we read in Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, look, the wages of sin was death. But we know that the gift of God is eternal life, and we have to take that thing on the other side. But I want to look at the flip side of this coin today, and I was thinking about it several years ago, and I said, well, you know, what if I were the devil? And if I would mention a name, and probably people under 40 years old probably don't know this name, but people over 40 years old is, you know, who's ever heard of the name Paul Harvey? You know, so see, if I would say that, the first thing that pops in people's mind is what? The rest of the story. So see, because everybody knows that, and like I say, people under 40 probably don't know him, the people over 40 does. Well, in 1964, Paul Harvey had transcribed a letter, and he recorded it in 1965. He said, if I were the devil. And I got to thinking about this thing, and I looked this letter up, and I said, you know, I want to reflect, and I want to kind of tie my message in today, and not to put Paul Harvey on equal ground with the Lord, but I want to reflect on things in the United States, not just the United States, but the world, you know, with a reflection from 1964 and 65 to the way things are today, and how things so subtle and so smooth, because what it said, look, that the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made, and that's how subtle he slides things in. So Paul Harvey started this letter in 1964. He said, look, if I were the devil, and this was a warning to the American people, you know, that Paul Harvey was trying to say, and people look at it as a prophetic letter, so to speak. He said, if I were the devil, if I was the prince of darkness, I would want to engulf the whole world in darkness. Why? Because he's got to get us from where we're at in a church. Somebody's been saved by grace, and he's got to pull them down into darkness, to pull them down in his world to get them where they need to be. But how are we going to do that? Because, look, he's got to be so smooth when he pulls us down that we don't even realize we've been pulled down, that we've been picked up, and we think we're going up in status and up in life. And meanwhile, we're getting further and further down, and we think we're going forward and we're going backwards. He said, look, he said, but I want to go with the whole world in darkness. He said, and I would have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population. So he's got to take over. He's got to start with something small, and he's got to get this thing. Now he said, look, he said, I'm going to go with the whole world, but let's just take this thing down to a small region of the United States. And if you ever look at a globe and look at the United States is a very small part of the world. When you take out 3/4 of its water, and the world is 22,000 miles round, but you look at the United States, it's only about 1,500 miles, by about 3,500, 4,000 miles. It's really a very small piece of land mass. In fact, the United States is only about 2.26 billion acres to start off with. So if we look at this small land mass and we take the water out, and we look at it, and look, I'm no genius, I just Googled some of these things. If the United States is 2.26 billion acres, where the government owns between 27 and 28% of it. And so when we look and we say, well, how's he going to take it over? Well, he's already took over 27, 28%, so that's between 1/4 and 1/3. That he owns just in the small United States. Now, I'm not talking about the world, like I say, because chances are most people in this room probably never leave this country. I have no desire to leave this country, so chances are I won't, unless I win a trip or something somewhere. And I spent 2 weeks in Hawaii, and I like Tabor City. I was glad to be back. You know, so anyway, and I know that's supposed to be in our country, but it's different. I've been to the Bahamas, and I still like Tabor City better. But anyway, but if you look at the government owns 27 to 28%, that's about 640 million acres that they own. Well, then you take that Canada owns 12.8 million acres of that. In fact, they own most of our timberlands, our sawmills, our logging equipment. You know, they control all of that in our industry. So therefore, when we go to build a house, they're the ones that's profiting the money off of it 9 times out of 10. So you take the timberland they have and the farmland they have, it comes up to about 12.8 million acres of that. Well, then you look over at China owns 384,000. Bill Gates owns 260,000 acres. Jeff Bezos 420,000 acres, and 7% of it's water. So therefore, you're already starting to lose at such a rapid ground. And why do I say this? When you say, well, and the reason I mention people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, because they're leaning so far to the left. You know, they're getting closer and closer where Christians don't need to be. And look, I'm not going to talk about anybody's salvation because that's between them and God. That's between them and the Lord. But what I'm saying, when we look at the way they start leaning to the left. But look at what Paul Harvey said in 1964. He said, look, I want a third of its real estate. So we see that they're already getting a third of it. He said, I want 4/5 of its population. Look, there's 333 million people here in the United States. Okay, only 31% of them are Christians. So where does that put us? That puts us at around a third. And then you start picking up Judaism and Buddhism and stuff like that. And then you realize that they're rapidly growing. We're rapidly falling away. And so you say, well, why is that? You know why? Because there's the same thing that he had prophesied years ago when he said, look, in order to get a hold on it, I have to pull these people back. I have to pull them into my realm and get them out of where they need to be. And I'm going to do it so slowly, they're not even going to realize it. He said, not only would it take 4/5 of the population, he said, but I wouldn't be happy until I seized the ripest apple on the tree, that is thee. That is the church, the one that he wanted to take, the people that's supposed to be the strongest, that's holding on and feeling that we're the closest to God and that we can't turn back. He said, but I'm going to get you. Because I'll find out your weakness and I'll pull you in and I'll pull you away from God and you'll never know that you've been pulled away. He said, but if I've got thee, he said, and I got the church. So look what he said. He said, so I'd set out about however necessary to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers with the wisdom of a serpent. He said, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve to do as you please. Look what he told Eve. He said, and he said to the woman, yea, have God said you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? He said here, so when he was looking at this, and Eve said, yeah, he said he told us not to eat of that tree. But look what he said in verse 2. He said, and the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the trees which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. So God had given them a direct command that did not partake of this fruit, but then all it took was a little subtle serpent to come over here and tell us, look, he just don't want you to have the power that he's got. So it's okay to eat of that fruit. Look, it's okay to partake of a little bit of sin. And we look back and we say, well, okay, well, look, it's okay to look, but I can't touch. It's okay to touch, but I can't feel. It's okay to feel, but I can't enjoy. And we keep inching ourselves on and on and on and on until after a while we're so consumed in sin that we can't get out. And we realize, well, what has happened? How did I get here? So when we look at this thing and we say, well, look, where the government is starting to control not only the land mass, and now they're controlling the population. And we say, well, 333 million people, and 31% of them are Christians, so we're looking at somewhere around 100 million people. Well, we say, well, look, where they're owning more and more of the land, so let's say take like China. China owns a pile of land here, but China also owns Smithfield, which is right down the road from us, which produces the meat that we eat. About a month ago, I was with the procurement man from Smithfield, and we were having a conversation. I said, how many hogs a day do y'all kill? He said, we kill 34,000 hogs a day at an average rate of 269 hogs. I said, man, that's a lot of meat. That's a lot of bacon. He said, yes, it is. Well, look, they control that. China controls it. Now, why did I mention China? Because China sees that they don't want the people heading toward Christianity. So what President Xi has decided to do, he said, look, we're going to rewrite the Bible. And the parts that's in red and bold where Jesus spoke something, they're going to take those out and they're going to insert them with quotes from President Xi. And then after a generation, then therefore we won't even know. You know, just like us, if somebody that's over 40, 50 years old say, look, I'm going to run up the Cordales and get a part. Well, if you're over 40, 50 years old, you know where I'm talking about. Well, if you're under that, nobody's got a clue who Cordell is. And they'll say, oh, you going to Napa. You know, because look, we were saying always, if say, look, I'm going up to see him to have lunch. Everybody knows where you're going. Somebody under 40 say, well, look, you got to go to Fowler's and get the same burger. So therefore, there's a change. When President Xi said, look, we're going to rewrite the Bible, and we're going to start inserting our things that we say in it, after a while, people won't even know the difference. But look what he said. He said, the devil said he's going to whisper these things to Eve that you can do as you please. And what is our politicians, when we look at the people running for president, say, look, we want you to have control over your own body. To be able to, look, that is the main focus of the Democrats. I'm not getting off on Democrats and Americans, so you know they're different. But when they say, look, when you look at your reproductive freedom, you know, we want you to have the right to do things. What did Paul Harvey say that the devil said, look, that you've got the ability to be able to do as you please. But we don't as Christian people. We can't do as we please. Why? Because we're in subjection to a God that saved us, and he gave us salvation, and he gave us a list of rules to live by, and either you live by them or you perish. And you may say, well, look, I don't agree with that. Well, I'm going to tell you, whether you agree or whether you disagree, the word is the word and the law is the law, whether you like it or whether you don't like it, because we can't change it. But what the serpent did here, he told Eve, he said, look, you could change it. The only thing you got to do is go over there and partake of that fruit. And we as Christians, that's the way we are. But look, I'm going to continue on. He said, to the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. And you know, people think it's just a history book when you go read about these things. But we know that the preacher said there's nothing new under the sun. So the same things that we're going on today and that we go through, they were happening back then too. They're just more publicized, and the media is just really on them. And the thing, but he said, look, but I would teach them that it's a myth, and I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. So look, you know, when you look at these well-known people that's on TV, and they say, look, be your own God. Be in subjection of your own being. You could be anybody you want to be. Well, now you've put God away, and you say, look, now I'm bringing it down that I can do anything. Look, there's nothing wrong with a positive attitude. To say, look, that I can be a doctor, I can be a lawyer, that I can be a preacher, that I can be president, that I can be better than what I am today. Look, that's a positive attitude. That we get to continue to go forward and don't just drag ourselves down. When people look at me and they say, well, you just a logger. I said, no, I'm not a logger. You might be a logger. I'm not a logger. I operate a timber company. You know, so there's a way that you look at it. Look, I don't get out there down and dirty and greasy and pick up a dull chainsaw and go do this and do that. Look, I'm looking at the glass half full that we operate a timber company. Walmart sells merchandise. McDonald's sells hamburgers. We produce timber. Now, I've changed my outlook on life at the things that I'm doing and say, look, that I'm going forward. And look, I didn't create a myth of something that I had. I just took what I had and I turned it around that God has given thee. What are we going to do with it? He said, look, but I will convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. He said, I would confide that what is bad is good and what's good is square. So when we look at our society and people say, well, I think this is the way things should be. Well, if we look at it, it is totally against God and against the Word of God. Well, I just don't think and I tell people oftentimes, one of the worst things you can do is say, look, this is how I feel about something. Because it's not about how I feel, it's not about how you feel. What you need to do is say, what does the Word of God say about something? Look, let's go back to the Scripture and look at what it said. And let's not say, well, look, well, this is okay, this is good, this is bad. Look, we've got to call it out for what it is. I remember several years ago when Blake was, I don't know, he was probably 10, 12 years old, and we'd bought him a lifetime hunting and fishing license before he got one or whatever, so he had a license, but somebody wanted him to go dove hunting. And it was right at sunset, and we were having a get-together, a baby shower or something at the house out in our outbuilding, and there was a bunch of people there, probably 50, 60 people there, and some of them were going to go dove hunting. And they said, well, can Blake go? I said, no, Blake can't go. And they said, well, why? It ain't going to hurt for Blake to go. Let Blake go. I said, no. I said, he can't go. Well, why can't he go? I said, well, first of all, I don't have to give you a reason, but if you want one, I can tell you. One, the sun's going down. He ain't supposed to be hunting after the sun goes down. Two, you're not supposed to be riding around shooting birds off of a power line from the back of a pickup truck. You know, and three, is dangerous, it's getting dark, and and a bunch of teenagers running up and down the road with shotguns shooting at power lines. I mean, well, it ain't gonna hurt. But most of all, if I teach him it's okay to break the law now, well, this is just a little bit. Well, what's he gonna do after a while? And he thinks he can walk in the store with a gun, even though they say, look, don't bring a gun in the store and rob somebody. Because we're allowing them to get away with something small here that we think wasn't going to hurt nothing, but later on, once he gets older, he realizes, well, look, you let me buy with it then, why can't I get by with it now? And, just like I know people that like to night hunt, well, it'd be one thing if they go out there in the woods to do it, but they get closer and closer to people's houses, and next thing you know, and I've actually heard and seen about this, a deer standing in somebody's yard, and they taking a shot at somebody's house to kill a deer of a night. And what kind of sense does that make? But that's what we would be promoting if we would let them do it, and just let them know, look, you can't do this. But that's what he's saying. He said, look, you let them know that something's good versus bad. But look what he said. He said, and the old I would teach to pray after me, our Father which art in Washington. And you say, well, Buck, wait a minute. You taking that out of context. No, because that's what the devil's going to try to do. You remember a while ago when I said there's 333 million people in the United States? 31% of them said that they're Christian. You know how many people live off of government assistance? And I'm not bashing government assistance. If you need it, get it. If you don't, get off of it. That's the only thing I can say about that. But there's over 100 million people in the United States on government assistance. That's pretty close to a third. So look, he's bringing us in, and then so therefore when we start to pray, we're going to pray, look, our Father which are in heaven, or our Father which are in Washington, putting a check in our mailbox. They're putting money on a SNAP card. Several years ago, when Donna worked at the doctor's office, there was a old black lady, I don't know, she's probably in her 70s or 80s, and she'd go up there to the doctor's office, she'd be freezing to death. She couldn't hardly see, couldn't hardly watch, she'd be freezing to death. Donna said, Buck, there's something wrong with the heater on their car. Can you go over and take a look at it? I said, yeah, you got her address? Donna said, yeah, I went over to the lady's house. And right over down here on Williams Road, and I pull up the house. I said, well, I'm by far from being a mechanic, but hey, I can figure out and see if she's got the controls cut on right, because if her eyes is bad and she's old, maybe she just don't have it cut on right. And come to find out, that's what it was. She didn't have it turned from the blue to the red. And so she was running air conditioner in 20-degree weather and didn't realize it. But the first thing I done, when I pulled up to this lady's house, and I was going to go introduce myself and let her know that I was there to look at her car. And so when I pulled into the car, in the yard, first thing I noticed, the big old can of beer cans and stuff, but I didn't let that stop me. I kicked them out of the way. I walked around, and I walked into the house, and I knocked the door, and Miss So-and-so lady, and said, yeah. Well, the first thing I noticed, when I looked, on one wall, there was a picture of Jesus. And I'm like, well, okay, she's a Christian. She got a picture of Jesus out there with a big old can, a stack of beer cans outside the door. And then right across from it, there was a big old picture of Obama on the wall. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how's this? Now, are we worshiping Jesus, or are we worshiping Obama? Which wall am I going to look at every day when I get up? And I think about the transfiguration. Remember when Peter, when there was Jesus and Moses, or when there was Jesus there, and he said, Lord, he said, should we make 3 tabernacles, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah? Well, look, we can't put Moses and Elijah on the same page. We have to look at Jesus as being a supreme being, and they were up under him. And that's where we in society look, and I think the world of Donald Trump, I hope he wins. But the thing about it is, I'm not going to idolize him to the point that I put a picture of him on my wall because, look, my walls, like I said, we're going through a remodeling process about the last year or two. But anyway, we got the 10 Commandments that we hang up. Look, we got the Lord's Supper. And I told y'all this several times out here in this very pulpit, and my wife for Christmas went and had me a picture made of the 7 things that God hates, and it's leaned up against the wall, and it'll go on my wall, so whenever I start to walk out, I can see that the 7 things, and now, like I said, it's leaned up against the wall, and I walk by them every day and look at them. The 7 things that the Lord hates. So if I've got the commandments, I got the things the Lord hates, I don't need a picture of Obama, and I don't need a picture of Trump hanging on the wall. The only thing I need is the Lord Jesus Christ, because I don't want to be drugged down by the government who says, look, that I'm going to control things. Look at where Western North Carolina is. Look, boy, I'm sure they're going to enjoy that $750 when they don't have a house, a vehicle, no ATM to go to that they put the money in their account after they go and sign up and wait for 10 days and hope that they can find somewhere to spend the money to. You know, or during COVID, and COVID did affect a lot of people, even in our church, but when they closed down all the businesses and said, look, you're not allowed to go to work, but we'll send you $1,400 to get by on. Well, you know, so people started looking, well, where's my $1,400? Where's my $1,400? I didn't get mine. Look, give me a job and give me an opportunity and get out of my way. And that way I could still say, Lord, you gave me a job. You give me an opportunity. You give me the chance to get what I need, and not waiting by the mailbox. Look, where's my $1,400 to come in and save me from the world? But what I'm saying, we can't pray, Lord, you step aside or washing and you help me and you come down and say me this. We just need to look at the Lord Jesus Christ. But look what he said after that. He said, and then he said, I'd get organized. He said, I would educate authors and how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I would threaten TVs with dirtier movies and vice versa. I would peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction, and I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. So when we look at that and we say, well, you know what? Well, what do you mean? Well, let's go back to what I said. When we look at our TV programs and we go to turn them on, the things that wouldn't have never been on there 20, 30, 40 years ago, look at it now. You know, look, if you look at programs like ABC, NBC, and yes, I'm going to call them by name, but when you look at ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, when they come on, which I hardly ever watch them, but if I'm flipping through the channel and they go to a commercial, it's talking about HIV medicine and 2 men up there kissing and the things that they promote that's so left-wing and so far out, then you say, my God, what are they doing? You turn it over to something like Fox News and you got Franklin Graham on there in a short 30-second commercial trying to teach you how to repent and be saved. And that's the difference in the things that we're looking at to promote and to watch. But he said, look, I will get TVs to do this thing, do vice versa. He said, and I will peddle narcotics. You heard Brother Randy the other night say when he come out of one of his surgeries and he was on this pain medicine, that he himself, almost a lifelong Christian, got saved at an early age, that he himself had started getting hooked on this thing. One of my wife's biggest fears was she had surgery a month ago that she wouldn't get hooked on these things. When I got ran over by a tractor 19 years ago, look, that was one of my big concerns. I wouldn't even let them give them to me because I knew so many people that were hooked on them, and here I wasn't just bearing the pain and setting it in my mind to try to get through the pain because I'd seen so many people to get hooked on them. And then when I look and people that has to get hit with Narcan and their own drugs and they go out and they hit them, and I'm thinking, well, look, I know I'm not a cop. Kevin, thanks for what you do, brother. Wouldn't have your job for anything. But the thing about it is, I say, look, why can't this thing just be simplified and say, look, if you take a drug or you sell a drug, arrest them both, throw them in jail, and be over with. I remember hearing Billy Graham one time said he went to the country and he said, well, what do y'all do about y'all's drug problem? And the country, the people in the country said, we don't have a drug problem. Billy said, well, well, how you do that? He said, well, if we catch anybody with drugs, we'll cut their hand off. Okay? He said at nightfall, he said, we hang them. Okay, with that, he said, we don't have a drug problem. Went to the next country, he said, well, what do y'all do about a drug problem? He said, we don't have a drug problem. Well, how you not have a drug problem? He said, if somebody gets caught with drugs, he said, we'll give them 30 lashes with a cat o' nine tail. We throw them in jail for 3 years. When they give out, we'll give them 30 more lashes and we'll let them go. We don't have a drug problem. You know, so when we look at these things, but we here in the United States, we say, look, the people's down and they need this and they need that. Why? Because we give it to them, we give it to them, we give it to them. You know, just last night, I don't want to call no names, but a young lady stood there in my living room and said, yeah, when my kid can't get to sleep, I slip him one of these little gummies to put him to sleep. Well, ain't that something how we get them started on? Don't be talking about one of our people in the church. But you know, what you call them little gummy things, just so they'll go to sleep. Well, after a while, then they got to have more and more and more. So anyway, don't leave, brother. I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about the lady behind you. But anyway, but he said, look, but I will tranquilize the rest with pills. Why? Because when we go to the doctor, you know, they say, well, look, you need this pill to help you with this and this pill to help you with this. Then you go to the next doctor. We were talking on the Sunday school. Well, that doctor says, no, you don't need this. You need this one. Well, after a while, you got so many pills, you ain't got a clue of what they are and what they're doing. You just got a whole handful of medicine that you're sitting there steadily throwing down and hope it's going to help you. And we take our focus off of the one thing and the one person that can heal us, and that's Jesus Christ. And we say, look, call upon the elders of the church. And all we got to do, throw some oil on them. And look, you heard Brother Randy the other night when he said that they caught that cancer. And when they got there, and he said they prayed on this thing. When they got there, they couldn't even find it. Now, look, is your cancer going to disappear? I can't say that. We're talking Lori Lancaster's sister right now is in the hospital with stage 4. What to say in the lungs, the spleen, a couple other things. Eat up with it, just found out. You know, so, I mean, look, sometime when it comes, I mean, it comes. But the only thing we do is put our trust in the Lord and not get drilled back on this thing. Look what he said. He said, but if I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves and churches at war with themselves. Tuesday night, we were on the way to church. He had 3 minutes to be here because Donald was running late, not me. But anyway, had 3 minutes to get, got a call, had to leave and go to the house where a brother and sister was fighting. I'm not going to call no names and stuff, not going to get in their situation. But a brother and sister was fighting, had to go break them up. They won't call the law on each other and stuff. And, you know, one said this, one that. And when it was so petty of what they were fighting about. Because somebody changed the name on the text message. And it wasn't about the text message. It was about because they changed somebody. You know how you get these group, we got group messages here with the prayer team, stuff like that. Somebody changed the name of it. And here they were fighting, about ready to call the law on each other. But what I'm saying, and not getting into their problem and not steaming it any further, but just saying, you know, he said, look, if I would cause wars against families. He said, look, and I would cause wars in the churches. Where people, you know, it only takes one small whisper to start something. It takes one small spark. You know, just yesterday, William and Jennifer went out, they had a burning barrel out behind our house, out behind the building. And look, we all got burning barrels, all of us are rednecks. Look, we take one everywhere we go out in the woods to burn old buckets and stuff and old boxes so we don't have trash everywhere. But anyway, they lit this barrel up and they went up to Fowler's to get a sandwich. Well, I happened to pull up at his house, and what had happened, looked over there, and the hayfield, the pasture's on fire, and it's got in the ditch going into the bean field and stuff. And I was like, well, there ain't nobody here. But what had happened when they lit this barrel up, I don't know if something fell out or the heat of it caught the grass on fire and it started running. Well, the next thing you know, well, we got a catastrophe up there. And here we are trying to put a fire out and dragging water hoses, going back to other houses, getting water hoses, smoke going everywhere. And the thing kept reigniting. But what I'm saying, that's the same thing that happens in church. You could one person could start a little rumor over here, and then they say, you know, I really didn't like what the preacher said about such and such. Somebody say, I really didn't like what Buck said about such and such. Well, but the thing about it is, and then you team up with that person, that person, that person, next thing you know, you got a church in outrage, and we're supposed to be in one accord that's heading in a direction, and because I put my opinion in something, there was even sections in the Bible where Paul said that he said it, not that God said it, that he said things. But, don't start rumors and whispers in the church and start fighting and intermingling with each other when the only thing that we really need to be on, even like other denominations, and y'all have heard me say, when I talk to other denominations, Methodists, the Holiness and stuff, and I say, look, well, what's the difference in a Methodist and a Baptist? And I had one guy tell me one day, he said, well, the only difference I know, he said, the Methodists speak to you in the liquor store and the Baptists won't. He said, they'll just drop their head and walk off. And I said, well, look, I'm not going to get in between denominations. The only thing that I can ask you is, do you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God? God raised him from the dead? He said, yes, I do. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven and only by him you can get to heaven? He said, I do. And I said, well, the rest of this stuff I don't care about. Whether you wear dresses, wear watches, or long hair, short hair, that's between you and him. I could care less. But the thing about it is, if we believe that Jesus Christ is who he says he was, and he is the only way that we can get where we need to be, then we're on the right track. Let's not let all this small stuff that comes in between us mess us up as a church or as Christian people outside of the church. Let's stand firm and let's not. But he said, look, this is what the devil said he was going to do, that he's going to get in between the families. He's going to get in between the churches. He said, but look, he said, and I would have nations at war against themselves. And look, and we see that. How do we do that? Because look, we've got Democrats, we've got Republicans. They're so far apart, how could they ever find medium ground? And they say, well, yeah, I believe in this. Well, I believe in that. But where do we look at it and say, look, he said, until each turn it was consumed, and with the promise of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage the school. So let's go back to the media part. Every time you turn the TV on, the only thing you see is the media fanning the flames of something. All the time, something bad, something negative. Years ago, they tried to have a news station that would have nothing but good news on it. Said, look, we're not going to have any bad thing. We're not going to report anything about it. And how does the news station stay open? Is by advertisement. And so, you know how long this all good newscast, 24-hour newscast, all good news, you know how long it lasted? 2 weeks, because nobody wanted to watch it. Because nobody wanted to hear the good news of things. Nobody wanted to advertise it. They couldn't even make enough money to stay in business, so they had to go back to the bad stuff. And then what did he do? He said, look, if I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect the discipline emotion. Just as let those run wild until before you knew it, he said you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every school door. And what happened when they pulled the prayer out of school? And now that's what we've got. We've got a resource officer standing there. We've got drug-sniffing dogs running up and down there trying to sniff lockers to see if there's any drugs in them. And so you say, well, look, how do we get from that to this? And you heard Randy say it the other night after 9/11, 39 senators and congressmen lined up to say a prayer, but the week before 9/11, 18 of the 39 had voted prayer out of school. And so look, so when we're turning things over to Washington, we're looking at our schools and say how we get there. But you see what he said. He said, but I would neglect to discipline emotions. A couple of years ago, we went to a basketball game over in Brunswick over there. But what's that? South Brunswick, I think, one over on 130. And so I'm getting there. 17, 18-year-old boys over there wearing little onesies and stuff. And I'm like, well, what's this all about, man? When I was 17, 18 years old, I was rough and tough. But I tell you what, I had a 36-inch waist and a 52-inch chest, mohawk haircut. I wouldn't be found dead in a pair of pajamas in the middle of the day. And then they said, well, today was Polar something day? Polar Express Day, where all the high school kids got to watch Polar Express and wear their pajamas to school. I said, boy, what are we teaching our young intellect? This is what we got to look at. But look, we're so in tune with their emotions that they want to come to school dressed like a cat or a dog or feel like a boy or a girl today. Look, let's be so in tune with how they feel. I had a young man tell me last week, he said, man, my daughter wants to go and eat oysters and stuff. He said, when they come out, and his daughter was like 10 years old, and I said, well, take her to eat oysters. He said, man, I don't want to sit there and pick them out for her and shuck them. I said, well, let her shuck her own. He said, well, she might cut herself. I said, well, didn't you cut yourself? How did you learn how not to cut yourself? Because you cut yourself. I said, you worried about her emotions, and what are you going to do? And give her an oyster, and once she cuts herself once or twice, either she'll quit eating oysters, she'll figure out how not to cut herself. But, we're so in tune, we'll let them be who they want to be. Vote for me, and I'll give you what you want to be. Look, flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 22. I'll try to find it right here. Don't really kind of on subject. Deuteronomy chapter 22. So when you start thinking about how emotions are, about this transgender, if boys should be boys and girls should be girls. Look here, and Deuteronomy, and Carly, you don't have to change, I'll come back to that. It said, look, and Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5, it said, the woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are an abomination unto God, unto thy God. Straight from the Word of God, laying it out. Look, don't be a little pansy coming up in here wanting to be a little girl today. Can I take this thing a little bit further? Look over at chapter 23, verse 1, because I don't want Buck Stanley to misconstrue anything that the Lord has to say. Verse number 23, he that is wounded in the stones or hath his privy member cut off shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. And we want to promote transgenderism. Well, what does the Lord say about that? Well, they just as good as we are. The Lord loves them just as good as we are. Look, I tell you, I've told you 1,000 times, the ground's level at the foot of the cross. But look, there is rules that we have to go by. You want to take your little boys and girls out there and switch them up and turn around, you better go back to the Bible and say, well, he loves me just as much. You better go back to the Bible. He said it's an abomination. And then he said, here, you're not even allowed to walk up into the sanctuary of my house. Keep that junk out there where it belongs. And that's what the Lord told him. Let me get back to what he said. He said, look, he said within a decade, well, first he said he'd had drugs in his dog there and meditated in the schoolhouse. He said within a decade, he said, I'd have prisons overflowing and I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse. And that's what we want to do. We want to get him out. I tell people, say, look, the laws aren't made for us. The laws are made for the criminal. The Christians know how to live. We don't need to be told how to live. Look, years ago, whenever they started having uniforms at school, so somebody asked me about them. I said, well, look, I like the uniform idea. I know the kids didn't like it. And I said, but the thing about it is, if the parents would have knew how to dress the kids, we wouldn't have had to depend on the school to dress the kids. Now, look, I love wearing my jeans and stuff when I went to school and my T-shirts and stuff. But, look, I knew what to put on. But when you've got a girl that don't know how to dress and you got a parent that don't know how to dress the girl and you let them go out there the way they want to and you got boys walking around, looks like they're getting ready for something they shouldn't need to be getting ready to with their pants hanging down to the waist. And not even realize it. And my God, and I got my daughter going there looking at a boy's pants hanging down around his knees. Look, put a belt on. Pull them up. I seen a woman picking on a young guy. He walked in the marathon one day, and the lady come up behind him, and he was 18, 20 years old, all rough and tough, dreads and stuff, built up, pants were pulled down. The woman was probably in her 60s. When I said, you want them pants down, boy? You want them down? Went there and started pulling them down, and him up there trying to pull them up. Well, you want them down? I'll put them down for you. But if we teach them how to live and how to dress, then we wouldn't have to worry about it. We wouldn't have to promote school uniforms and stuff. But he said, look, but soon I would evict God from the courthouse, and he said, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress, and in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and defy science. Going back to what we were talking about a while ago, look, allowing women preachers in the church. And look, I think that women have a great thing to add to the church. Teaching Sunday school, taking care of these kids, organizing the church. Women have their place in the church. But let me tell you, the United States is falling down so much because that's what we want to do. Look, we need the first woman president. I don't care who it is. I don't care how stupid she is. If she can't make it through a Senate, but let's just put her up there. They asked Donald Trump, said, do you believe Kamala Harris was chosen for DEI? Yes, she was. Because you know what the qualification was vice president was the last term? Look, you had to be a woman of color. That was the only thing that you had to be, a woman of color, and you were in the running. That wiped out everybody else that could run for the job. But the thing about it is, women have their place. And look, I'm not down on women. Y'all heard me say this before. My mom is a woman, my wife's a woman, and hopefully one day my daughter will be a woman. But and I mean, I say that because she's a girl now. And you know, it won't be long. One day she'll be a woman. But women have their place. But you know what? The United States, the rest of the world is laughing us down. Because look, Donald Trump got assassinated. Why? Because the Secret Service said, look, we've got to put DEI in here, and the Secret Service tell them, look, DEI stands for DIE. Because when you put a 5'3", 360-pound woman in front of a 6'3", 6'4" man to sit there and say, look, take a bullet for him, what's she gonna do? Nothing. When you put a state trooper hat on a woman, you say, look, you go out there and protect us, what's she gonna do? She's going to get herself or somebody else hurt. And you say, Buck, you chauvinist. No, I'm not chauvinist. I'm going back to the Bible. When Jesus started walking and went to pick the 12 disciples, how many women did he look at when he walked by? He picked 12 men. When one of those men failed, what did he do? He picked up another man. When he said, look, pick the deacons of the church, he said, call upon you 7 men that are just. That you picked 7 men. When he looked, he said, if any man required the office of a bishop, Paul said. So, you know, we have to look at things like that and say, look, well, maybe God thought something when he said something about a man. You know, in this very church we fell away from, and I'm not saying that as a bad habit, but when I first started here, at the first of every service, we would call the men up, all the men come up and pray. And every man in the church would come up and line up on the altar. Not that we were chauvinists, not that we were saying that the women were below the men, because the man is supposed to be the forefront of the household. The woman's supposed to back him up and help him go where he needs to be, not be over the man. Now look, this was set up by God. And so, but when we start turning this thing and twisting it, where would we be? He said, but look, but I defy science. He said, but I would lure the priests and the pastors into misusing the boys and the girls and church money. And we see it all the time. I hadn't heard of anything local, but we see it all the time where priests are molesting children, where money is getting missing in churches and stuff and being laundered and turned. But look, we can't misuse anything that God gives us, because lest it puts us back where where the devil wants us to be. He said, look, and if I were the devil, he said, I would make the symbols of Easter an egg and the symbols of Christmas a bottle. So look, we're more in tune at Christmas time. Say, look, all right, get your eggs. We do it here, and I love Easter. I don't like Easter egg hunt, but I like being part. I like eating the candy. But you know, look, we'll promote, look, let's have an Easter egg hunt. We'll have 27 of them. We'll have one at the ball field, one at the schoolhouse, 2 or 3 at home, one out here. Let's bring them all. But look, we still do have the Easter service, though. But look, we should be singing Days of Elijah and looking at resurrection of Jesus Christ, saying, look, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. You know, and look at the resurrection of the Lord. And then when we look at Christmas parties, back when I was a teenager and me and Donna first started dating, I was in my early 20s. Well, we used to go to so many Christmas parties. I mean, they'd be probably 10, 15 of them a year. And finally, one year we said, look, we got to cut all these things out. I mean, the whole month of December, 2, 3 times a week, going to this party and that party, and most of them was lined up around alcohol. And I tell you what, I was lost then. I mean, look, I knew Christmas was about getting presents, and when I got older, I knew it was about going and getting drunk at a Christmas party. But look, but we promote that. Let's go to a Christmas party. Let's get drunk. Let's do this, do that. But we got to take it back and say, look, this is the birth of a king. This is, look, we should be worshiping him. Why? Because that was my old life. Look, let's put this idea away that it's just about chocolate rabbits and Easter bunnies and eggs and Christmas parties and drinking, and say, look, it's about the birth of a Savior, and it's about the restoration of a Savior. He said, but look, if I were the devil, he said, look, he said, I would take from those who have and give to those who won't, until I have killed the incentive of the ambition. So what is our society doing? Look, socialism been here for years. We say, look, we don't want socialism. We're not. It's been here for years. Look, we take from the people who work and we give to the people who don't work. Now they just advertising them more, and they say, look, let's take from the rich and let's give to the poor. Well, look, if you think about it, all of us are already paying 50% anyway, because if you're living in a 23 to 25% tax bracket, Social Security 6.2%, Medicare 1.45%, you add that together, and then you take the taxes you're paying on goods you buy at the store, you probably tax 50% of what we make is going anyway. Then when you look, only 48% of the country is working, and there's 100 million people on government assistance, so then where does that leave us at? Look, we've been taking from the rich and giving to the poor for years. Now they're just promoting and saying, look, this is the way we want to live, so let's push it. And I'm about finished. He said, look, and what do you bet I could get whole states to promote gambling as a way to get rich? So what do? Say, look, let's start an educational lottery. And people say, well, look at how good the lottery is going. Look, it's going to our schools, it's going to our education, but when you get to school, what are they giving it to? I mean, look, what are they promoting? We heard last week at this very time, Tony stood in this very pulpit. Where's he at? Robinson County over there, ain't it? We're Columbus, he's Robinson County. And he said, look, they're interjecting Scientology into their schools over there. When we look at the liquor stores, every year they put the breakdown of what the liquor stores in Whitehall and Brunswick and Table City make, and look, a portion of the money from the liquor stores goes to the school. And so we'll say, well, I'm glad we got a liquor store here because we get money from this. But what are the schools promoting? What are they pushing? When you start a lottery and you say, look, I can make you rich if you just give a little bit of money to school. And we say, well, we're going to do it as a good cause. But no, the only thing we're doing is we're turning this intellect around, and we can't understand the difference of where he's at. He said, look, but I will caution. He said, I will caution against the extremes and hard work and patriotism and moral conduct, and I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned and that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. Now look, and I'm going to tell people here, look, if you're shacked up, you're living in sin. And look, I'm going to follow that to say, me and my wife shacked up before we got married. But I tell people it was a sin when we done it, and it's a sin now. But I weren't a Christian then. Then I got married in 1999, and I became a Christian in 2005. Now, I'm not being judgmental against people who are shacked up. I'm just telling you that sin is sin, and if you're doing it, the Bible said it's better to marry than to burn. Well, you saying, should I go and get married and be shacked up? I'm telling you, the Bible said it's better to marry than to burn. I'm not telling you to get married to somebody you don't love, but quit shacking up. Because look, but what he's saying here, he said, look, I will convince him that marriage is just old-fashioned, that you don't need to get married. Look, and I've seen people who have been together for years, got kids in their 20s, and I think they're married, and then somebody tell me, no, they're not married. Well, we're married in the sight of God in our eyes. Well, no, you sinning in the sight of God. I don't know what church you going to. Well, we made a commitment to ourselves. We don't need a piece of paper to tell us that we love each other. Well, look, you need a piece of paper to say you're legally married, and that's what God is looking at in God's honor. And if you shacked up, the only thing you've done was went over there and had this kitchen table peanut butter religion and jelly, peanut butter and jelly religion, and you saying, well, look, that don't matter because we love each other and God knows our heart. I know plenty of people that say that they're Christians. We talked about it in Sunday school this morning. Young man, very dear friend of mine, lives in Whiteville. He got a piece of property here in Tabor City. I was talking to him one day, and he'll talk the game with you. Told me one day, I said, man, where y'all go to church at anyway? I thought he went to church at the end of his road. And they said, man, I ain't been to church in 11 years. I said, oh, what the world? Well, it just got to where all the church was promoting just about money and this and that and programs and stuff they had. And I'm like, well, you do have programs in church. What pulls you in takes money to, to make it. What I'm thinking to myself, I wasn't going to get in a spitting contest with him and just trying to get. On the way to church this morning, I seen him mowing one of his properties here in Tabor City. And I'm thinking to myself, we consume ourselves to think that we're all right, but we continue to going backwards to where we're at. He said, look here, and I'm going to finish with this. He said, look, and thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into the bed with diseases which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. So to end this whole thing, when he laid out in this outline, the things that was going on in 1964 is still going on today. When he was bashing them and he was putting them down, he said, look, if I were the devil, I would promote all these things, I would push all these things, and I would do it to a point that you wouldn't even know that it was the devil doing it. And he ended the letter with saying, if I were the devil, I'd continue doing just what I'm doing. And just like in today's world, and I'm ready, Stephanie, if you are. And in today's world, when we look at things and we say, well, look, where are we at? Well, I'm just as good as you, I'm just as good as you. But there's only one person we need to focus on, and that's Jesus Christ. And if we say, look, to be a Christian is to be Christ-like, and to put our focus on him and not let the devil lure us away like he lured Eve away. Now, look, I'm not putting all the blame on Eve because where was Adam in all this? Adam should have been there because, look, he told him, because what happened, and if we go back to it, or what did it have? When God went and called him out on it, and he went to Adam, he said, well, what happened? Adam told him, it's the woman that you give me. But then he went to Eve and he said, well, why'd you do this? Well, because of that serpent. And, we all want to kick the can down the road, and even from children, we could walk right back there, and there could be two kids fighting in the nursery, and we'll say, well, look, why are y'all doing this? Well, he done it, she done it, and they'd start pointing fingers automatically because it's that sinful human nature that we start blaming. They blame them, they blame us. What we need to do, if we need to look at ourselves, as we stand at our feet and they start to play, when we look and say, look, we could look at ourselves and say, look, if I were the devil, what would I do? How would I do things? But then we say, look, if I were God, how would I do things? And we need to turn our frame of thinking around and say, look, I want to be like God. I want to be Christ-like. I want to live by the commandments. Look, I want to do more and more that I can do each and every day. I want to pray more. I want to come to church more. I want to talk to God more. I want to meditate more. Whatever I need to do, I need to be like Jesus. So let's not worry about these things. Well, look, do you think drinking's wrong? Do you think smoking's wrong? And like I told the Sunday school class this morning, and even Paul said, he's going along there, they had so many gods, they had to put up a statue to an unknown God in case they forgot one. And so what we need to do is say, look, I want to be like Jesus. No, Jesus didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't cuss, he didn't shack up. And that's what we need to be like. We need to say, look, I'm going to focus on him and him only am I going to focus on. As y'all stand to your feet, what's the hymn?